Not a girl anymore. That's what he whispered as he stepped in close, smirking like he was doing her a favor. One blocked the exit, one reached for her belt, and the last one said it flat out. You won't leave this place a virgin. They didn't see a teammate. They saw an exit wound they wanted to leave their names on. This is how SEALs get broken in, one muttered. Don't worry, another added. We'll do it gently. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She let them circle, and then something happened in that room. Something that left two men crawling, one begging, and all three praying she never says a word. 14 hours earlier, Kira Ashford arrived at Fort Bridger with the wind still biting through her cuffs, boots scuffed from the last deployment, duffel bags slung across her shoulder like it weighed nothing. The guard at the gate didn't look up when he waved her through. No salute, no inspection, just a grunt and a lazy thumb jab toward the admin building. You'll figure it out. The facility wasn't like the last one. No formal rotation schedule, no field operation tension in the air. Just rows of bleached white trailers, half-dug fighting pits turned to mud, and a haze of cigarette smoke curling out of a side shed where three men watched her walk by. Not like she was a person, not like she was hostile, just curious, like she was a moving object that didn't quite belong. She didn't give them anything to read, no smile, no acknowledgement, no twitch of discomfort, just her stride, controlled and neutral and unbothered. The kind of walk you learn when you've been watched before and know that reaction is the same as weakness. Inside the holding unit, she was assigned a corner bunk on the top rack. No one offered a handshake. The staff sergeant who handed her the locker key didn't even glance up from his monitor screen. Your rotation's limbo, he said. 1 week, maybe 2. Your transfer order goes active next quarter. Translation, you're here, but you don't matter. She nodded once, tucked the key into her hip pocket, and moved past 2 rooms of men half-dressed, half-bored, half-measuring her with eyes that didn't need to speak to communicate intent. They didn't flirt, they clocked her. Every bit of her. From the soft tension behind her shoulders to the lack of a unit patch on her jacket. From the way she carried her bag instead of dragging it to the silence in her jawline. She was new. She was young. She was alone. And more importantly, she was leaving soon. Someone said it low as she passed. Short timer. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't even cruel. It was identification. Category. Type. Short timers weren't staffed. They weren't protected. They weren't dangerous. They were just passing through. And everyone knew what that meant. She claimed her bunk with precision. Boots squared under the frame. Bag nested against the locker. Eyes forward. She didn't ask who slept above her. Didn't unpack. Just sat, spine upright, palms flat on her knees, gaze loose and unfocused, like she was looking at something 1,000 yards out. She didn't want to join. She just wanted to blend. But that's the problem with silence in rooms like that. It draws attention. By dinner, the entire East Wing knew 3 things about her. 1, Navy. 2, pipeline complete. 3, barely 20. They didn't need anything else. One of them cracked a joke at Chow. Bet she hasn't even seen a bar fight. Someone else answered without laughing. Bet she hasn't even seen a bar. She didn't flinch. That seemed to bother them. And in a place where boredom and testosterone ran neck and neck every hour of the day, a quiet woman in uniform was never just background. She was a trigger waiting to be pulled. They just hadn't decided how yet. 8 months earlier, Kira had been drowning. Not metaphorically, actually drowning. Hell Week, Day 3, surf torture at 0400. Water so cold it felt like knives peeling her skin back layer by layer. The Pacific doesn't care how badly you want the trident. It takes what it takes. And that morning, it was taking her under for the 4th time in 6 minutes. Instructor voices were barking somewhere above the roar. Quit now and the pain stops. Ring the bell and you can sleep. But the bell wasn't an option. Not for her. Not when her father's name was etched on a memorial wall in Fallujah, with a death date from 2004. Not when the last thing he ever told her was, "Be stronger than me." Her lungs were screaming, her vision edged black. And then a hand gripped her vest collar and yanked her upright just long enough to suck in one ragged breath before the next wave rolled in. She never saw the face, just the silhouette of someone tall and broad-shouldered standing in the observation zone, someone who wasn't supposed to interfere, but had anyway. Later she'd learn his name, Master Chief Garrett Blackwood, 68 years old, call sign, Stone, legend from the Cold War era, Grenada, Panama, the kind of operator who didn't need to advertise because the stories did it for him. He pulled her aside 3 days after Hell Week ended, after she'd somehow survived when 62 other candidates hadn't. The conversation was short, efficient, no congratulations, no praise, just this. "You passed BUD/S. Now I teach you what saves your life when your brothers become your threats." She didn't understand it then. She does now. They trained in back rooms and off-hour ranges where no one asked questions. Blackwood didn't teach her how to shoot better or run faster. He taught her how to break a man twice her size using nothing but anatomy and timing. He taught her the Blackwood suppression hold, a close-quarters combat technique he developed in 1983 when 3 hostiles cornered him in a Grenada safe house with no weapon and no backup. He taught her that strength wasn't about muscle mass. It was about precision, about knowing exactly where to strike so the body stops obeying the brain. "Grenada," he'd said once, sitting on the edge of a training mat with his hands wrapped and scarred. 83, 3 men, no gun, just this. He demonstrated a palm strike to an invisible radial nerve cluster 2 inches below the elbow joint. You hit it right, their hand becomes meat. No strength debate, no size advantage, just nerve disruption and gravity. She practiced it 217 times before he nodded approval. 218 before he said she was ready. "You'll know when you need this," he told her on their last session. "And when you do, don't hesitate. Hesitation gets you killed. Precision keeps you breathing." She didn't know she'd need it at Fort Bridger. She didn't know she'd need it against men who wore the same uniform. But Blackwood knew. He always knew. It happened without ceremony. No isolation, no closed doors, no raised voices. Just the wrong conversation at the wrong time in a place where boredom rotted into curiosity and curiosity curdled into entitlement. It was late afternoon, downtime, nothing formal, nothing suspicious. A handful of men lingered near the benches outside the equipment cage, passing a thermos between them, boots off, shirts loosened. The air had that stagnant post-training stillness, where the body's exhausted, but the mind keeps circling, looking for something to chew on. Kira wasn't part of the group. Not really. She'd stopped only because one of them had asked, casual and neutral, where she was headed next. "Orders say East Coast," she replied. Flat. Minimal. That should have been it. But someone else followed up, voice pitched just low enough to sound harmless. "So you got anyone waiting on you back home?" She didn't answer at first. Not because she was caught off guard, but because she was deciding whether the question deserved oxygen. Finally, she said, "No." That answer landed differently than they expected. A pause. A look exchanged between 2 of them. One of them smirked, not unkindly. "Career first, huh?" She nodded once. "Discipline matters." Another pause, longer this time. Then the question shifted. Not louder, not sharper, just closer. "So what about before all this? You know, relationships?" She turned to face them then, calm. No tension in her shoulders, no defensive edge in her posture. Just honesty, delivered the way she'd learned to deliver everything else, clean and unadorned. "I'm a virgin," she said, saving myself. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was recalculation. Someone let out a laugh, too fast, too loud. The kind of laugh people use to buy themselves time when something doesn't fit the shape they expected. "No way," one said. She didn't smile, didn't argue, didn't soften it. "I'm serious." Another laugh, thinner this time. Someone shook his head like he'd just heard a joke that didn't land. "You're kidding." "I don't kid about things like that." That's when it happened. Not the laughter, but the change. The way their eyes stopped skimming and started measuring. The way bodies shifted, weight redistributing, like a group that had collectively leaned forward without realizing it. One of them, older and quieter than the rest, tilted his head slightly and said, almost thoughtfully, "That's not how this world works." No anger, no threat, just a statement, like gravity, like physics. The others didn't challenge him. They didn't need to, because in that moment, something snapped into place between them. An idea so ugly in its simplicity, it didn't need explanation. She wasn't experienced. She wasn't hardened. She hadn't been tested, which in their minds meant she wasn't finished yet. The conversation drifted after that, not back to normal, but sideways. Jokes resumed, but they weren't aimed at her anymore. They were about concepts, about weakness, about what breaks people. She listened without reacting. She noticed how none of them met her eyes now, not because they were embarrassed, but because they were already talking past her, deciding things. She excused herself a minute later, citing a gear check. No one stopped her. No one followed. But as she walked away, she felt it. The weight of attention that wasn't pursuit yet, but something worse. Claim. She didn't understand it fully then, just the edge of it, the way her presence now bent the room slightly out of shape. Behind her, one of them muttered, not quite under his breath, "Someone's going to fix that." Another answered just as quiet, "Yeah, life will." They laughed again. This time, she didn't hear it. But the damage was already done, because from that moment on, she wasn't just passing through. She was a problem they believed needed solving. She didn't hear the first story they told about her, didn't catch the second either, but by the third it didn't matter, because they weren't stories anymore. They were doctrine. It wasn't just the men from that bench. It never is. It was the next two who overheard the laughter, the one in the corner who saw her walk away, the guy who'd been bored all month and finally had something to sink his teeth into. And suddenly it was a group belief, not a joke. She was a virgin. She said it herself. And worse, she'd said it like it wasn't shameful, which meant, in their minds, that she was either naive, lying, or asking to be set straight. And so the story spread. Not loud, not direct, not actionable, just sideways. She said she's saving herself. She doesn't even know what it's like. Can you imagine making it through BUD/S just to be that? They didn't say it with lust. They said it with mission energy, like this was a failing that had slipped past inspection, like she was walking around unvetted. One guy phrased it perfectly, hands behind his head during chow rotation. "You don't send someone into war still wrapped in the packaging." Laughter again, but sharper now, less surprised. They weren't mocking her anymore. They were preparing. The conversations changed around her. At first they were just quieter. Then they stopped including her at all. Inside jokes stacked too fast to follow. Statements with no context. "Some people don't get it yet. She'll understand soon." It's better when it's not a choice. She didn't ask questions, didn't adjust her posture, didn't give them a single visible cue that anything had shifted. But she noticed. Her locker had been moved once, subtle, just 2 inches, but enough to suggest hands had been there. Her PT schedule started overlapping more often with theirs. She stopped hearing her name, only titles now. The Navy girl, short timer, number 20, like she was a training exercise, not a person. And still, she said nothing. That's what they didn't understand. They thought silence meant they were getting closer. But her silence was distance. It was measurement, patience, timing. While they tried to decide who'd be the one to do the favor, She was already mapping which halls had working exit alarms and which didn't. She started walking the perimeter during downtime, never the center, always near doors, corners, shadows. She didn't carry a knife. She didn't need one, because she could hear it now, what they were building together. Not a plan, a philosophy. Virginity wasn't just something she had, it was something she was denying them. And in the culture they'd built for themselves, that was a kind of theft. One night she caught a phrase that didn't make sense until later. If we don't teach her what it means now, someone else will. And worse, that was the lie they told themselves. That what they were planning wasn't exploitation, it was protection, correction, training. They believed they were helping her. That was the most dangerous part. The orders came through without drama. No announcement, no briefing. Just a quiet update in the system, and a folded paper slid across a desk, like it wasn't the most important thing in the room. She read it once, then again. Reassignment confirmed. Transit window, 24 hours. New unit, new location. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. This place had always been temporary. She'd known that from the moment she stepped through the gate. What she hadn't realized, what she understood now, was how much that mattered to them. Because once the word spread, the air changed. Not all at once, not obviously, just pressure. Like a weather shift you feel in your ears before the storm actually hits. They knew. Someone always knows first. A clerk, a driver, a man with nothing better to do than talk. By afternoon, it was everywhere. Low voices, half glances, conversations that stopped when she passed. She's gone tomorrow, last day. Didn't think she'd make it through here untouched. That word again, untouched. They didn't say it like a hope. They said it like a loophole. Because leaving meant she wouldn't be around to complain, wouldn't be there to stir things up, wouldn't have time to become a problem. And more importantly, she wouldn't have backup. They were thinking hard and fast after that. You could feel it in the way they stopped pretending. The jokes dropped. The sideways comments turned direct, though still coded enough to deny later. Last nights are always weird, one of them said near the lockers, not looking at her. Transitions mess with people, another added, almost kindly. Better to get things sorted before you move on. She didn't respond. She packed methodically instead, folded what little she'd unpacked, checked her gear twice, kept her movements efficient, contained. No rush, no hesitation. But she felt it now, the sense of being watched. Not like prey, but like an object someone didn't want to leave unfinished. The excuse came late in the day. Routine enough to pass without comment. A final clearance walkthrough. Inventory reconciliation. One last check before she turned in her badge and keys. The kind of task no one questions because everyone's done it before. The location was clean, legitimate, close enough to foot traffic that nothing felt overtly wrong, but tucked just far enough from the main flow to give privacy. Someone said it won't take long. Someone else added, just dotting I's. She hesitated for exactly one breath. Not because she didn't see it, but because she saw it too late to pretend she hadn't. Walking away now would mean confrontation, noise, questions she didn't have proof to answer yet. And worse, it would confirm what they already believed about her, that she was fragile, that she'd freeze. So she nodded once and walked in. The door shut behind her with a sound that was softer than she expected. No slam, no lock click, just a quiet seal. They thought that meant control. They thought time had cornered her. What they didn't understand was that she had been training her entire life for moments exactly like this. Moments where everything narrowed, where excuses fell away, where intent mattered more than words. As the room settled into stillness, she adjusted her stance. Not defensively, not aggressively, just enough to feel the floor beneath her feet. To measure the distance between bodies, to count the exits she'd already memorized 3 days ago. They believed this was her last day, that whatever happened next would stay here. They were right about one thing: she would be gone tomorrow. But what happened in that room? That was going to follow them for a very long time. The room was too quiet, not the kind of quiet that comes from respect, the kind that follows certainty, the kind that comes when men believe the outcome's already decided. She counted 3 of them. Not positioned like a team, no formation, no choreography, but stationed. Each one close enough to react, far enough not to look obvious. She didn't stop walking. The man who'd asked her to come, who'd used the gear check as an excuse, was leaning casually against the storage cage, clipboard in one hand, the other resting flat on a bench that didn't belong in that room. "Should only take a second," he said. She recognized him now. Damon Kellerman, 31, Navy, the one who always spoke last in group conversations, the one who measured everything before committing, the calculating type, the dangerous type. She nodded once, neutral, professional, hands relaxed at her sides. Another man closed the door behind her. Trent Vogel, 29, Marine, scar running through his left eyebrow from some bar fight he wore like a badge. No lock sound, just the soft, mechanical hush of rubber edging sealing the threshold. A third stepped slightly left, Reed Palmer, 28, Army, the follower, the one who laughed at jokes 2 seconds after everyone else. Subtle movement, but enough to cut off one angle of retreat. None of them smiled. None of them laughed. They weren't performing now. They were activating. The one at the cage gestured to the bench. "Sit down." She didn't move, didn't speak. The one near the door added, voice flat, standard protocol, "Everyone does it." Still, she didn't respond. Then the third man, Trent, the biggest one, took a slow step forward and dropped the line that removed any doubt. "Take the uniform off." He said it like a procedure, like it was her turn to comply, like this was training and she'd simply missed the briefing. She met his eyes finally, and it was only then that she realized they weren't looking at her like a person anymore. She was a concept now, a failure they'd agreed to fix, a box that needed checking before she left their world and entered another one, unprepared. The man near the bench added, quieter now, almost instructional, "This is how women are made ready." The words landed flat, but with weight. They weren't improvising. This was practiced, rehearsed in their heads if not their actions. And suddenly the mission they'd been building in their minds over days, maybe weeks, was now fully live. The last man closed distance, hands out, not threatening exactly, just moving into guidance position. Like they expected her to freeze, like compliance was inevitable once the door was shut and the options narrowed. Like every woman before her had folded at this exact moment, and she would too. She didn't freeze, but she didn't fight yet either. She let the moment settle, let them believe the room had become theirs. She listened to the sounds behind the silence, the breath rate of the largest man tightening, the shift of boot rubber against rubberized flooring, the faint creak of the clipboard being set down with the kind of care that meant hands were about to be freed for other work. She watched the angles, door, wall, vent, cage. Then she did something that made all of them pause. She exhaled, long, controlled, and sat down right where they told her to. No fear in her eyes, no hesitation in her spine, just obedience. They looked at each other. Something flickered between them. Victory, maybe. Confusion, possibly. Adrenaline, definitely. They thought they'd won. They thought she was complying. They thought the hard part was over and everything else would follow the script they'd written in their heads during all those late-night conversations when they convinced each other this was right. The biggest one moved first. Trent approached slowly, posture wide, shoulders rolled forward like he was trying to take up all the space in the room. Not talking now, not posturing, just claiming space. When his hands reached for her arms, she didn't flinch. She let him touch her. Let him believe. Let his fingers wrap around her left wrist. Let him apply pressure. Let him think contact meant control, until he tightened his grip. That was his final mistake, because at that point she had everything she needed. The bench for leverage, the height differential, the breath in her lungs, the distance between what they thought she was and what she'd always been. She let his hand reach her wrist, let his weight commit forward, and then nothing else in the room mattered. Not the door, not the numbers, not the clipboard, just his body in the exact right place to break it. The first hand reached for her arm like it had a right. No preamble, no hesitation, just entitlement wrapped in muscle and confidence. He gripped her wrist tight and pulled, angling her elbow down toward the bench like she was equipment being adjusted. His thumb pressed just above the joint. Deliberate, practiced. That told her everything. They'd discussed this. They'd rehearsed it in theory, and now they were executing. Before she could respond, the second man stepped behind her. Reed planted one boot outside her left leg and pushed his thigh forward. Subtle but effective, blocking her from rising cleanly. Just stay still. Not a threat, a correction. A command given to a trainee who didn't know the drill yet. From the corner, the third man's voice came flat and final. This doesn't take long. We're doing you a favor. They weren't touching her sexually, not yet. They were positioning her. Containment first, breaking her stance. The same way you pin someone in a combatives class before the real pressure starts. One wrist restrained, one leg boxed, one breath away from collapse. Most people would have frozen. Most people would have tried to scream, to struggle, to plead. She did none of those things, because none of those things had ever saved anyone in a room like this. Instead, she adjusted her breathing, lowered her shoulders by a hair, let the hand tighten, and then she moved, fast, not wild, not loud, just precise. Her elbow twisted against the grip, not away, but into it, rotating the attacker's forearm into a lock against the bench itself. She used her own weight, leaned forward and dropped the base of her palm straight into his radius. The bone just below the wrist where the radial nerve cluster sits, exposed beneath skin and tendon. Where Blackwood had taught her to strike 218 times until she could do it in her sleep. Crack. Not the sound of bone breaking, the sound of nerve disruption. The sound of a man's hand forgetting how to be a hand. Trent screamed, high and sharp and surprised. His grip collapsed. He fell sideways, cradling his arm like it had been sawed off at the nerve. The kind of pain that doesn't fade fast. The kind that lingers in the shoulder and neck and makes you wonder if you'll ever feel your fingers again. 1 second, maybe 2. The man behind her reacted instinctively. Reed. Too late. He reached for her waist, probably expecting to catch a flailing target. Instead, she rotated low, dropped her center of gravity, swept her inside leg across his stance, a tight arc, fast and low, with her shin aimed at the side of his knee. Not the kneecap, the medial collateral ligament, the MCL, the soft tissue that holds the joint together when you pivot or twist or do anything human knees were designed to do. She delivered 40 pounds of lateral force in a space designed to handle 10. The pop was clean, almost surgical. He didn't even fall forward. He folded in place, face first into the mat with a groan that ended in a gag, like his body was trying to process 2 kinds of pain at once and couldn't decide which deserved the scream. 4 seconds, maybe 5. The third man charged. Damon, no hesitation now, just fury. The kind of fury that comes when a plan falls apart faster than the brain can adjust. He moved like a brawler, wide steps, full weight behind the shoulders, arms reaching to grab and crush and pin. The kind of charge that works in bar fights when the other guy's drunk or scared or untrained. She let him come. Let him get close enough to think contact was guaranteed. Let him commit every ounce of his 215 pounds into forward momentum. Then she sidestepped, not a full evasion, just a pivot, and used his own forward drive to redirect his trajectory. His neck met the lip of the metal bench at 18 miles per hour. Not enough to kill, enough to stun. Enough to make his brain shut down non-essential systems for 6 or 7 seconds while it figured out if the spine was still intact. He didn't scream, he bounced, then dropped. 11 seconds, 3 men, 0 hospitalizations needed, but none of them would be standing without assistance. She stood over them, breathing like she just finished a warm-up, eyes calm, posture squared, hands relaxed again at her sides. She didn't spit, didn't taunt, didn't say a word. They were groaning, crawling, trying to piece together what had just happened, trying to reconcile the story they'd told themselves with the reality now written across their bodies in nerve damage and hyperextended ligaments and bruised tracheas. She walked to the edge of the mat, grabbed the clipboard they'd used as a prop, held it like it might still have something worth signing. One of them tried to rise, Trent, got halfway before his leg betrayed him and he dropped again. She crouched beside him, just once, close enough that he could hear her clearly. "You did this to yourselves." Then she stood, turned, stepped back to center. 3 men, broken and silenced, surrounded her like punctuation marks on a page they never should have tried to write. There were no threats left to give, only consequences, and they were still arriving. The 3 of them lay scattered across the room like a failed ritual, none of them unconscious, none of them victorious. Every breath they took now was an admission, because there was no covering up what had just happened, no version where they let her win, no edit where this was a misunderstanding. Their bodies told the story now, and their silence confirmed it. She didn't gloat, she didn't pace, she just stood, centered, composed, and terrifyingly calm. One tried to speak, Damon, the first one, wrist cradled against his chest like a wounded bird. Ego shredded worse than the nerve cluster in his forearm. "We were just..." She cut him off with a look. Nothing more. A glance sharp enough to pin him to the mat. The second man was half sitting now, Reed, clutching his knee, face pale with the weight of consequences not yet spoken. He tried to shift the story. "It got out of hand. We thought..." She took a step toward him. Not fast, not loud, but absolute. He stopped mid-sentence, like the words had abandoned him. "You thought?" she said. The first words she'd spoken since the room turned. "You thought I was weak. You thought being quiet meant soft. You thought virginity was permission." She crouched just low enough to look him in the eye. "You thought wrong." No one moved. The air felt heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. Then, as if summoned by some twisted symmetry of fate, the door clicked open. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, just a slow mechanical swing of the hydraulic hinge. And then 2 women stepped inside. Standard rotation, probably here for their own gear check. They froze immediately, caught in the stillness. Their eyes swept the room. They saw everything, the clipboard on the floor, the bruises starting to rise, the red-faced men struggling to sit upright. One of the women, taller, older, started to speak. "Should we?" "No," Kira said. Her voice was different now, not hard, not cracked, just undeniable. "Stay." The women did. One against the wall, one near the rack, neither speaking, but both watching. She turned back to the men, slowly, fully, and then she did what none of them expected. She didn't beat them again. She asked them questions. "What were you about to do?" Silence. "What was the plan?" Nothing. "Then say it." The man nearest the door cracked first. "Damon, we were going to..." He couldn't finish it. His voice broke. "We just wanted to..." She waited. He looked down, humiliated beyond recovery. "To take it," he whispered. "Her first time." She didn't react, didn't blink. She turned to the next. "And you?" Reed hesitated longer, but not forever. We thought she needed to be shown. "And you?" She faced the third, Trent, still nursing his leg. He didn't look up. Correction, he said. Like training. Her head tilted. Correction? He didn't answer. Behind her, one of the women exhaled, sharp, furious, but said nothing. She let the silence stretch until it suffocated. Then she stepped back and said clearly, for all four of them to hear, "You don't get to be feared anymore." The words landed harder than the strikes ever had. You don't walk around like you're stronger. You don't hold power with your silence. Not after this. She pointed. Not at them. At the women. They saw it. Then at the room. This space remembers. Then finally, at the door. You leave when I say you can. And then she stood still. Arms folded, feet planted. They didn't move. Because in that moment, no one knew what came next. And then they broke. Not with screams, not with surrender. The first one dropped to his knees. Damon. A slow, embarrassed descent that looked like compliance, but felt like confession. The others followed. Because they were out of defiance and out of options. She didn't ask them to kneel. She didn't have to. That was the worst part for them. She let them sit there in their silence. Heads down, egos gutted, strength redefined. And then she turned to the women by the door. If anyone ever tries to tell you fear is strength, remember this. They nodded, both of them. Then she turned and walked out. No speech, no threat, no dramatics, just command burned into the air behind her. The three men stayed kneeling, because standing again would have meant believing they still deserved to. She packed with the same discipline she'd arrived with. Every fold exact, every strap pulled tight, every item logged in the inventory sheet without pause or error. Not a word was spoken. The three men stayed out of sight. She didn't need to look for them. She could feel it in the hallways, in the weight of silence that had shifted from her shoulders onto theirs. Every footstep she took echoed in a space where they used to laugh, where they used to control the tempo. Not anymore. The same men who once filled door frames and shadowed locker rooms now moved like ghosts, if they moved at all. She caught glimpses, not of confrontation, not of defiance, of avoidance. Eyes that darted away the second they met hers. Posture stiffening behind corners. A cough behind a door that didn't open again. No apologies, no threats, just distance. At the final checkout desk, the officer on duty barely made eye contact. "Sign here," he muttered. She did. "Transport leaves at 1800. You'll be met by a driver." She nodded once, turned, walked away, her bag over her shoulder, papers in her hand, uniform crisp and untouched. Every corridor she crossed felt smaller than before. Every turn reminded her how little space it really took to unmake a myth. And when she reached the final door, the one that led out of that temporary hell into whatever came next, she paused, just long enough to let the quiet register. Not for her, for them. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need validation. She needed only this. That they knew exactly why the silence was heavier now. That every time they saw another woman walk through that facility, they'd remember. That they would never again be the scariest ones in the room. She opened the door and walked out. No one followed. She never came back. Not to visit, not to gloat, not to finish the job. And that was the worst part, because they had been bracing for it. They thought maybe she'd file a report. Maybe she'd call someone. Maybe there'd be some kind of hearing, some reckoning, some outside force they could prepare for or fight. But it never came. No phone call, no investigator, not even a rumor. She was just gone. And in her absence, the unit didn't heal. It rotted. At first, the three of them tried to spin it. She went crazy. She jumped us. She snapped. But no one believed them, because no one had ever seen them rattled before. And now they flinched at door hinges. They looked away when women passed. They spoke softer, laughed less. That wasn't weakness, that was fear. They told each other it was nothing. She'll fade, people move on. But people didn't, they remembered. Other women started walking taller, Conversations stopped being filtered through smirks. The men who'd once filled the room now barely held space in it. They became warnings, not leaders. Not because of what she did, but because of what she didn't have to do. She never filed paperwork. She never made a scene. She just made them remember. They resented her for that, said she was manipulative, said she'd used the system. But everyone who mattered had seen the aftermath. They'd seen the men who used to call themselves trainers move like they were afraid of their own shadows. They'd heard the silence after she left, and how it was louder than any fight. And the worst part? The three of them still had to wake up in that same facility, still had to wear the same uniforms, still had to pretend like they hadn't tried to break someone and been rebuilt around her instead. Because the only thing worse than being overpowered is being forgotten by the one who did it. The two women who witnessed it couldn't stay silent, not because they wanted attention, but because silence felt like complicity now. Corporal Sloan Brennan filed a climate complaint 3 days after Kira left. Not about the incident specifically, about the culture, about the way women were talked about when they weren't in the room, about the informal power structures that protected predators and isolated targets. Private Reese Dalton backed her up, added details, named names, not just the 3 men in that room, but others, the ones who laughed, the ones who knew, the ones who looked the other way because it was easier than standing up. The investigation was quiet, no press releases, no public statements, just a slow, methodical review that ended with 3 transfers, 2 demotions, and 1 new commanding officer. A woman, Colonel Margaret Thornton, 48, Army, no nonsense, zero tolerance policy in writing and in practice. Within 6 months, Fort Bridger was unrecognizable. Formal reporting structures, mandatory training, an actual chain of command that didn't run through whoever had the loudest voice in the smoke shed. 8 more women came forward, not about assaults, about smaller things, comments, looks, the feeling of being evaluated every time they walked into a room. Sloan was promoted to sergeant, started leading integration training courses, teaching male soldiers how to see female soldiers as soldiers, not as threats, not as curiosities, just as people doing the same job. Reese transferred to instructor duty at a different base, requested it specifically, said she wanted to teach the next generation before the culture poisoned them. In Storage Room C, they renamed it Accountability Bay, used it for ethics training now, mandatory sessions for every incoming rotation. There was a plaque outside, small, brass, just 3 words, where silence ended. None of the instructors explained what it meant. They didn't have to. Everyone knew. 3 months after she left Fort Bridger, Kira Ashford was assigned to SEAL Team 3, Middle East deployment, high-value target missions, the kind of work that separates operators from everyone who just wears the uniform. Her team leader was a man named Marcus Hunt, 34, 15 years in, 2 Bronze Stars and a reputation for running the tightest squad in naval special warfare. He didn't want her, not because she was a woman, because she was untested in his eyes. Pipeline complete doesn't mean combat ready, he told the Command Master Chief during the assignment briefing. I don't care what she did at BUD/S. I care what she does when rounds are coming down range and the plan falls apart. The Master Chief didn't argue, just handed over her file and said, "Read it and decide." Hunt read it. He decided she'd last 3 weeks before requesting transfer. He was wrong. The squad was 6 men when she arrived, all of them older, all of them with deployment time that made her Hell Week look like summer camp. They didn't haze her, didn't welcome her either, just watched, measured, waited for her to prove she didn't belong. First week, she didn't speak unless spoken to, kept her gear squared, hit every mark in training. When they ran, she ran faster. When they shot, she shot tighter groups. When they studied target packages, she memorized details they missed, not to show off, just to survive. Second week, Hunt put her on point during a room clearing drill. Full kit, live rounds, 6 hostiles on paper, 2 friendlies mixed in. The kind of scenario designed to make you hesitate because hesitation in close quarters gets people killed. She cleared it in 42 seconds. No missed threats, no friendly hits. Clean. Hunt didn't congratulate her, just nodded and moved to the next drill. Third week, one of the squad members, a senior chief named Dalton Rourke, 41, former Marine raider with a scar across his jaw from Fallujah, pulled her aside after morning PT. "You're good," he said, "but good doesn't mean trusted. Trust comes from bleeding together." She looked at him, didn't blink. "Then I guess we better deploy." He almost smiled. Almost. Fourth week, they got the call. 48 hours to wheels up. Target package, high-value insurgent leader operating out of a compound in northern Syria. Intelligence said 6 to 8 hostiles. Civilian presence likely. Limited exfil options. The kind of mission where everything that can go wrong usually does. Hunt briefed the team in a secure room with maps and satellite photos spread across a table that had seen 100 briefings just like this. Kira listened, absorbed. When he asked for questions, she had 3. All tactical, all relevant. He answered them without hesitation. For the first time since she joined the team, he looked at her like she might actually belong. They deployed on a Tuesday, flew into a forward operating base that didn't have a name, just a grid coordinate, staged for 36 hours, reviewed the plan, checked weapons, slept in shifts. The night before the operation, Kira sat alone in the corner of a dusty tent, field stripping her rifle for the 4th time, when Hunt sat down across from her. "You nervous?" he asked. She didn't look up. "No." Liar. She paused, looked at him. "Maybe a little." "Good," he said. "Nervous keeps you sharp. Fearless gets you killed." He stood, started to walk away, then stopped, turned back. "Ashford, if something goes sideways tomorrow, I need to know you'll do what needs doing. Not what feels right, what needs doing." She met his eyes. "I will." He nodded. "That's all I need to hear." The operation launched at 0300. 6 operators, 2 vehicles, 15-minute drive to the target compound. No moon, dust in the air thick enough to taste. Kira was 4th in the stack. Hunt on point, Rourke directly behind him. Then 2 others, Carter and Mills, both SEALs with years of experience written into the way they moved. Then her. Then the 6th man, a combat medic named Fisher. The compound was exactly where intelligence said it would be. Single-story structure, mud walls, 2 entry points, 1 vehicle outside. Thermal imaging showed 8 heat signatures inside. More than expected. Hunt made the call to proceed anyway. They breached at 0317. Flashbang through the door. Entry team flowing in with a kind of choreography that only comes from doing this 100 times before. Kira moved with them. Smooth, controlled, her sector of fire clear. 2 hostiles down in the first room. Clean shots, center mass, no hesitation. Second room, Carter took point. Opened the door and caught a burst from an AK on full auto. 3 rounds hit his plate carrier. Knocked him back but didn't penetrate. He returned fire. Hostile down. But the noise brought more. Footsteps from the hallway. Voices shouting in Arabic. The plan was already falling apart. Hunt called inaudible. "Fisher, get Carter stable. Ashford, you're with me and Rourke. Mills, rear security. We push through." She didn't question it, just moved. Followed Hunt and Rourke down a narrow hallway lit only by their weapon lights. Shadows jumping. Dust still settling from the breach. They hit the 3rd room and found 2 more hostiles, armed, moving toward them. Hunt and Rourke fired simultaneously, both down. But there was a 4th room, and thermal had shown 8 signatures. They'd only accounted for 6. Hunt stacked on the door, Rourke behind him, Kira 3rd. She could hear movement inside, shuffling, a voice, a woman's voice, crying. Hunt held up a fist. Everyone froze. He looked back at Kira. Hostage situation, he mouthed. She nodded. He breached soft. No flashbang, just speed and surprise. The door swung in and Kira saw it all at once. A woman on the floor, hands bound, two children beside her, a man standing over them with a pistol, not pointed at the door, pointed at the woman's head. Hunt's rifle was up, but he didn't fire. Too close, too much risk. The man started shouting, in Arabic first, then broken English. You leave or she dies. You leave now. Hunt didn't move, didn't lower his weapon, just held position. The room was maybe 12 feet across. The man was 7 feet from the woman, 5 feet from the children. The angles were impossible. Any shot risked hitting someone who didn't deserve it. Kira saw it differently. She saw the man's weight distribution. 60% on his back foot, 20% forward, 20% shifting because he was scared and adrenaline makes people stupid. She saw his grip on the pistol, tight but high, finger on the trigger but trembling. She saw the distance, the bench between them, the trajectory if she moved low and fast. She didn't ask permission, didn't wait for Hunt to give the order. She just moved, dropped her rifle on the sling, stepped left out of Hunt's line of fire, closed the distance in 3 strides. The man saw her coming, started to turn, started to aim, but he was thinking in seconds and she was thinking in fractions. Her hand caught his wrist before the pistol fully rotated, twisted it up and back, the same grip reversal Blackwood had taught her 8 months ago. His finger broke against the trigger guard. The pistol clattered to the floor. She swept his legs. He went down hard, face into the dirt. She was on him before he could process what had happened. Knee in his spine. Flex cuffs from her kit securing his wrists. Hostile secure, she said. Hunt and Rourke were still stacked in the doorway, weapons up, processing what had just happened. Then Hunt lowered his rifle. Good work, Ashford. She didn't respond, just moved to the woman. Cut the bindings, checked the children. Neither injured, just terrified. She pulled a chem light from her kit, cracked it, handed it to the older child. A boy, maybe 6. You're safe now, she said in Arabic. Learn from deployment prep. Basic phrases, enough to matter. The boy took the light, held it like it was the only real thing in the world. They exfiled 12 minutes later. Hostage and children transferred to local Allied forces. High-value target secured, 0 friendly casualties. Carter had bruised ribs, but nothing broken. The mission was clean. Textbook. Except for the part where Kira improvised in a hostage situation, and it worked. Back at the FOB, Hunt pulled her aside. That move you made, in the room, you didn't wait for clearance. No, sir. Why? Because waiting meant someone died. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. You made the right call, but next time give me a hand signal so I know you're moving. Keeps us from shooting each other. Yes, sir. He started to walk away, stopped, turned back. You're not untested anymore, Ashford. You're one of us. She didn't smile, just nodded. But something shifted. She felt it. The weight of proving herself was gone. What remained was just the work. The deployment lasted 4 months, 17 missions, 3 firefights, 2 more hostage situations. Kiera ran point on 6 of them, took shrapnel in her left shoulder during a vehicle ambush in week 9, refused medevac, patched it in the field and stayed in rotation, earned a combat action ribbon, then a Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Valor device for actions during a compound raid where she pulled a wounded teammate out of a kill zone under fire. By the time they rotated home, the squad didn't see her as a woman anymore. They saw her as Ashford, the operator who cleared rooms faster than anyone except Hunt, the one who could shoot a 2-inch group at 300 meters in a sandstorm, the one who didn't flinch when the mortars came in at 0200 and everyone else was diving for cover. Hunt wrote her evaluation personally, submitted it to the commanding officer with a single recommendation. Promote immediately, assign to leadership track. This operator has the capability to run her own team within 2 years. The CO read it, called Kira into his office. Lieutenant Commander Paul Hendricks, 52, Navy, silver hair and a handshake that felt like a promise. He told her to sit. She did. He slid the evaluation across the desk. Read it. She did. Didn't react. Just read it twice and slid it back. Hunt doesn't write evaluations like that often, Hendricks said. In fact, he's never written one like that. You impressed him. That's not easy. I just did my job, sir. No, you did his job. And Rourke's. And your own. All at the same time. He leaned back in his chair. I'm putting you up for Silver Star. The ambush in week 9. You took fire to pull Fisher out. He'd be dead without you. That's not just doing your job. That's exceeding the standard. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. Hendricks continued. I'm also offering you 2 options. Option 1, stay with Team 3. Take a squad leader position when the next one opens, probably 6 months. Option 2, transfer to BUD/S as an instructor. First female combat instructor in SEAL history. Help shape the next generation. She didn't hesitate. Option 1, sir. He smiled. Thought you'd say that. But think about option 2. Because the Navy needs you there. Not now, but eventually. She nodded. I'll think about it, sir. Dismissed. She stood, saluted, walked out. 2 days later, the Silver Star ceremony happened in a warehouse on base with 30 people in attendance. Hendricks pinned the medal on her uniform, shook her hand, said nothing that wasn't already written on the citation. Hunt was there, Rourke too, the whole squad. Fisher, the medic she'd pulled out, hugged her afterward, said thank you in a voice that cracked. She told him to buy her a beer and they'd call it even. That night, alone in her quarters, she took the medal off, looked at it, felt the weight, not of the medal, of what it represented. People had died earning these. People better than her, braver than her. She set it on the desk and didn't look at it again. The next morning, she got a call from a number she didn't recognize, answered it anyway. Ashford, a voice she hadn't heard in months, rough, familiar, proud. Saw the news, kid. Silver Star, your old man would have been proud. Master Chief Blackwood. She exhaled, didn't realize she'd been holding her breath. Thank you, Master Chief. Don't thank me. You earned it. He paused, heard something else too. Fort Bridger, 3 men, 11 seconds. She didn't respond. He continued, you used the grip reversal, the one I taught you. Yes, Master Chief. Good. That's what it's for. Not for war, for moments when your own people become the enemy. She swallowed. I didn't file a report. I know, and you shouldn't have. Because what you did was better than any report. You made them afraid. Not of punishment, of themselves. That fear lasts longer than any court-martial. There was silence on the line. Then he said, I'm retiring next month. 49 years. Since 75, Grenada, Panama, Gulf War, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, all of it. I've trained 2,300 SEALs, lost 47 in combat, almost lost one to friendly fire. But I didn't, because I taught her what she needed to know. He paused. I'm proud of you, Kira, not for the medal, for the choices you made when no one was watching. She felt something break in her chest. Thank you, Master Chief. One more thing. There's a ceremony. My retirement. Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. 3 weeks. I'd like you there. I'll be there. Good. And Kira, bring that medal. I want to see it in person. The ceremony was held on a Friday afternoon in late October. The sky was clear. The wind off the Pacific was cold, but not biting. 200 people attended. Officers, enlisted, family members, former teammates. Blackwood stood at a podium in his dress whites, with 49 years of ribbons on his chest, and a trident that had seen more wars than most people could name. He gave a speech, short, direct, no sentimentality, just this. I've served through Grenada, Panama, Gulf War, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and operations you'll never hear about because they're still classified. I've trained thousands, lost dozens, learned from all of them. He paused, looked out at the crowd. But the most important thing I learned didn't come from a manual. It came from watching people choose who they want to be when the rules don't apply, when no one's watching, when the right thing and the easy thing are miles apart. He gestured to the side. Kira was standing in the front row. Lieutenant Kira Ashford, Silver Star recipient, SEAL Team 3. She earned that medal pulling a teammate out of a kill zone under fire. But that's not why I'm proud of her. The crowd was silent. I'm proud of her because 6 months before that deployment, she was in a room with 3 men who thought power meant taking what they wanted. And she taught them a lesson I've spent 49 years teaching. That strength isn't about what you take. It's about what you protect. He looked directly at her. She didn't look away. She didn't file a report, didn't seek revenge, didn't make it public. She just made sure they remembered. And because of that, dozens of women who came after her walked into that same facility and didn't have to fight the same fight. That's leadership. That's legacy. He stepped away from the podium, walked directly to her. The crowd parted. He stopped in front of her, reached into his pocket, pulled out something small, his trident pin, the original, from 1975 when he first earned it. This survived Grenada, survived Panama, survived every operation I ran for 49 years. Now it's yours. Master Chief, I can't. You already did, in that room. This is just metal. What you took was knowledge, and knowledge is only valuable if you pass it on. He pinned it to her uniform, right next to the Silver Star. Then he saluted her. She returned it. The crowd erupted in applause. She felt tears, but didn't let them fall. Not here, not now. After the ceremony, she found him alone near the beach. He was standing at the water's edge, looking out at the horizon. She walked up beside him, didn't say anything, just stood. You thinking about option 2? He asked. How did you? Because I know you, and I know the Navy's going to keep asking until you say yes. She nodded. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Good, because the next generation needs someone who understands what I taught you. That combat isn't just overseas. Sometimes it's in your own house. And the warriors we need aren't just the ones who can fight enemies. They're the ones who can recognize when the enemy is wearing the same uniform. He turned to her. You ready for that? She looked at the water, at the place where the ocean met the sky. I don't know. He smiled. That's the right answer. The ones who think they're ready never are. 18 months after Fort Bridger, Kiera Ashford accepted option 2. She transferred to BUD/S as an instructor. First female combat instructor in SEAL history. The announcement made headlines. Not because she wanted it to, because the Navy wanted it to. Proof that the culture was changing, that women could lead, that the pipeline was open. She didn't read the articles, didn't do interviews, just showed up on day 1 of Class 389 with the same attitude she'd brought to every other challenge in her life. Do the work, prove nothing, let the results speak. Class 389 had 52 candidates. 4 of them were women. Harper Finley was one of them. 19 years old, former college soccer player, recruited straight out of University of North Carolina after scoring in the top percentile on every physical and mental assessment the Navy could throw at her. She looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. Tall, athletic, blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun. The kind of woman who turned heads without trying. The male candidates noticed. Some of them made comments. Quiet ones. Ones they thought the instructors couldn't hear. Bet she doesn't make it past Hell Week. Too pretty, too soft. Probably here for the photo op. Harper heard them. Didn't react, just kept her head down and did the work. Kira noticed. She always noticed, because she'd been Harper once. The one everyone underestimated. The one they thought would quit. First week, Kira ran the class through basic conditioning. Runs, swims, calisthenics. Harper kept pace with the top 10%. No complaints, no requests for modifications. When the male candidates tried to outpace her on the beach runs, she matched them stride for stride until they gassed out and she kept going. Second week, Kira introduced close quarters combat drills. Hand-to-hand, grappling, submissions. The kind of training that separates people who look tough from people who are tough. Harper held her own, got thrown a few times, threw back, learned fast. Third week, one of the male candidates, a former college wrestler named Brett Connolly, 22, 6'2", 220 pounds, made a comment during a grappling drill. Loud enough for everyone to hear. This would be easier if we didn't have to go easy on the girls. Kira stopped the drill, walked over, stood in front of him. You think you're going easy? Yes, ma'am. Prove it. Full contact round. You versus Finley. No holds barred except submissions and strikes to the head. First tap loses. Conley looked at Harper. She looked back. Didn't blink. He shrugged. Okay. They squared off on the mat. Kiera gave the signal. Connolly moved first. Rushed in with all his weight. Textbook tackle. Harper sidestepped. Used his momentum. Caught his arm. Twisted it into a joint lock. He tried to power out. She adjusted. Dropped her weight. Leveraged the angle. 3 seconds later, he tapped. The class went silent. Kira looked at Connolly. Still think you were going easy? No, ma'am. Good. Run a lap. Think about why you lost. He ran. Harper stayed on the mat. Didn't gloat. Didn't say a word. Just reset and waited for the next drill. After class, Kira pulled Harper aside. You've got skills. Where'd you learn that lock? Jiu-jitsu, ma'am. Started when I was 12. Good. Keep using it. Size doesn't matter if you know where the weak points are. Harper nodded. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Go ahead. How did you deal with it? The comments, the assumptions, the guys who thought you didn't belong. Kira looked at her, really looked at her, saw herself 5 years ago. I didn't deal with it, she said. I just outlasted it. Kept doing the work until the work was louder than the noise. Harper absorbed that. Thank you, ma'am. One more thing. If someone tries something, if it goes past comments, you tell me immediately. Harper hesitated. What if I can handle it myself? Then handle it, but tell me after. Because the next woman who comes through here deserves to know what she's walking into. Yes, ma'am. Hell Week came in week 4. The Crucible, the place where 70% of candidates quit. 5.5 days of continuous training, 4 hours of sleep total, cold water, heavy boats, instructors screaming, the bell always within reach. 1 ring and it's over. Harper made it to day 3. So did 2 of the other women. The 4th quit on day 1, not from physical failure, from psychological breakdown. The instructor said she just stopped moving during a surf drill, stood there while the waves hit her, didn't respond to commands, didn't cry, just stared. They pulled her out, sent her to medical, DOR, drop on request. Day 3, Harper started showing cracks. Not in her body, in her face. The blankness that comes from running on 0 sleep and maximum pain. She was carrying a boat on her head with 5 other candidates, all male, all bigger. They were struggling too, but they weren't the ones the instructors were watching. Kira watched from the observation deck, saw Harper stumble, catch herself, keep moving, saw the male candidates shift the weight away from her, not to help, to test, to see if she'd quit when it got harder. She didn't. Day 4, surf torture. 0400, water, 58 degrees. Candidates locked arms, sitting in the surf zone, waves rolling over them. Hypothermia setting in. Instructors walking the line, offering the bell, offering warmth, offering sleep. Harper was shaking, lips blue, eyes half closed. The candidate next to her, a former college football player named Hayes, whispered loud enough for the instructors to hear, "She's not going to make it. Look at her." Harper opened her eyes, looked at him. "Fuck you." Hayes blinked, then laughed. "All right, respect." She made it through day 5. Through the log PT, through the runs, through the final evolution where they carry boats over sand dunes until their legs give out, and then carry them some more. When the instructors finally called secured, 48 candidates were left. Harper was one of them. So were the other 2 women. Kira met her after. Harper could barely stand, could barely speak. Kira handed her a bottle of water. "You made it." Harper drank, nodded, couldn't form words yet. Kira continued. "Week 1, you prove you can show up. Week 4, you prove you won't quit. Now comes the part where you prove you can lead." Harper looked at her, found her voice. Hoarse, broken, but there. "I'm ready." 6 weeks later, Harper Finley was named class leader. First woman in BUD/S history to hold the position. It wasn't a ceremonial role. It was tactical. The class leader coordinated movements, made decisions under pressure, represented the class to the instructors. If the class failed, the leader owned it. Some of the male candidates resented it, said it was political, said the Navy was making a statement. Harper heard the whispers, ignored them, focused on the work. Kira pulled her aside before a major field exercise. "You're going to get tested, not by the instructors, by your own class. They're going to wait for you to screw up, and when you do, they're going to say it's because you're a woman." Harper met her eyes. "What do I do? Don't screw up." Harper almost smiled. "And if I do anyway? Then own it, apologize, fix it, move on." Leadership isn't about being perfect, it's about being accountable. The field exercise was a simulated hostage rescue. 2-day operation, limited sleep, live fire drills, complex decision trees. The kind of scenario designed to create chaos and measure how people respond. Harper's team was assigned the primary assault element, 12 candidates, her call on entry points, her call on timing, her call on how to handle unexpected changes. And there were changes. Halfway through day 1, the instructors changed the target building layout, added a second hostile force, pulled one of Harper's key candidates out for a simulated injury. She adapted, reassigned roles, adjusted the timeline, briefed the team on the new plan. They executed. It wasn't perfect. One candidate missed his sector during the breach. Another misidentified a friendly. But the mission succeeded. Hostages recovered. Threats neutralized. 0 friendly casualties. Kira watched from the observation tower, took notes. After the debrief, she called Harper in, sat her down. "How do you think you did?" Harper exhaled. "We completed the mission, but I made mistakes. Should have caught the sector gap before entry. Should have verified friendlies before clearing the room." Kira nodded. "You're right, you missed those. But you also adapted when the plan changed, kept your team focused, got the job done. That's leadership." Harper looked up. "So I passed? You're still here, aren't you?" Harper nodded. Kira leaned forward. "You're going to graduate, Finley. And when you do, you're going to deploy. And on that deployment, you're going to be in a room where the plan falls apart, where everything you train for doesn't apply. And you're going to have to make a choice. The right choice or the easy choice?" Harper listened. Kira continued. "When that moment comes, remember this. You didn't get here because someone gave you something. You got here because you earned it. Every step, every evolution, every time someone said you couldn't, you proved you could. That's not luck. That's who you are." Harper's voice was quiet. "Thank you, ma'am." Kira stood. "Now get out of here. You've got a class to lead." Harper graduated BUD/S with class 389, top 15%, earned her trident, was assigned to SEAL Team 5. Deployed 8 months later, ran 17 missions, earned a Bronze Star with Valor for actions during a compound raid where she made a split-second decision that saved 3 lives. 2 years later, she became an instructor, followed the same path Kira had, because someone had to, because the next generation of women deserved to see that it was possible. Kira watched it happen from a distance. She'd moved on by then, promoted to lieutenant commander, associated to Naval Special Warfare Development Group. DevGru, the tip of the spear, the operators who handled the missions no one else could. She ran a team, led operations, became the kind of leader she'd needed when she was 20 and drowning in surf torture. But she never forgot Fort Bridger, never forgot the 3 men in that room, never forgot what Blackwood taught her, that the hardest fight isn't against enemies overseas, it's against the people who wear the same uniform and think that makes them safe. 3 years after Fort Bridger, Kiera got a message, forwarded through official channels. A letter, handwritten, from Reed Palmer, one of the 3 men, the follower, the one who cried. It was short, 3 paragraphs, no excuses, no justifications, just this. Lieutenant Ashford, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to respond, but I need to say it anyway. What I did was wrong. What we planned was worse. I've spent 3 years trying to understand how I became the kind of person who would do that. I still don't have an answer, but I know this. You changed my life, not by forgiving me, by showing me what I'd become. I left the Army 6 months after Fort Bridger, got help, therapy, a lot of it. Now I work as a counselor at a high school, teaching kids about consent, about respect, about the difference between power and strength. I tell them a story sometimes. I don't use your name. I don't use mine. But I tell them what happens when you confuse silence for weakness. When you think taking something makes you strong. I tell them the truth, that I tried to hurt someone who didn't deserve it. And she didn't just stop me, she made me stop myself. I don't know if that matters to you, but it matters to me. Thank you for not killing me. Thank you for giving me the chance to become someone different. Reed Palmer. Kira read it twice, folded it, put it in a drawer. Didn't respond. Not because she was angry, because there was nothing to say. He was doing the work. That was enough. She never heard from Damon Kellerman or Trent Vogel. Didn't expect to. Some people learn. Some people just disappear. 5 years after Fort Bridger, Kiera Ashford stood on the beach at Coronado at dawn. Same place Blackwood used to run. Same water. Same wind. She was 25 now, lieutenant commander, 2 deployments, 43 missions, more medals than she cared to count. But none of that mattered as much as what happened next. A figure jogged up beside her, slowed, stopped. Harper Finley, now lieutenant junior grade, SEAL Team 5, fresh off her 2nd deployment. Ma'am, Harper said. Kira smiled. You don't have to call me ma'am anymore. We're the same team now. Harper smiled back. Old habits. They stood in silence, watching the sun rise over the Pacific. Finally, Harper spoke. I got offered instructor duty again, full-time. They want me to help redesign the BUD/S pipeline, make it more inclusive. You going to take it? I don't know. Part of me wants to stay operational, keep deploying, prove I can do it as long as anyone. Kira nodded. I felt the same way. Then someone told me something I didn't want to hear. What? That the best operators aren't always the ones downrange. Sometimes they're the ones training the people who go downrange, making sure the next generation doesn't have to fight the same fights we did. Harper absorbed that. You think I should take it? Kira looked at her. I think you should do what you think is right, but I also think the Navy needs people like you in positions where you can change the culture, not just participate in it. Harper nodded slowly. Okay, I'll think about it. Good. They stood in silence again. Then Harper said, Ma'am, can I ask you something? Sure. Fort Bridger, what happened there? Did it change you? Kira didn't answer right away. She thought about the room, about the 11 seconds, about the choice she made to use precision instead of rage, about the men who kneeled, about the women who witnessed, about the culture that shifted because she refused to let silence mean weakness. Yeah, she finally said, it changed me, but not the way you'd think. It didn't make me harder, it made me clearer about what strength actually is, about what's worth fighting for. Harper listened. Kira continued. I used to think strength was about winning, about being the best, about proving people wrong. But that room taught me something different. Strength is about knowing when to fight and when to walk away, when to speak and when to let silence do the work, when to destroy and when to rebuild. She paused. Those three men, they thought taking something from me would make them powerful, but I took something from them instead. Not their bodies, their belief. The belief that they could get away with it, that no one would stop them, that women like me would just accept it. She looked at Harper, and when I walked out of that room, I didn't just change them. I changed everyone who heard the story. Every woman who walked into Fort Bridger after me. Every instructor who thought twice before letting toxic culture slide. Every man who realized that predators don't just wear enemy uniforms. Harper's voice was quiet. That's a hell of a legacy. Kira shook her head. It's not a legacy yet. It's just the beginning. Because culture doesn't change with one person. It changes when that person teaches the next person. And that person teaches the next. Until the thing that was once normal becomes unthinkable. She turned to Harper. You want to know if you should take that instructor job? Take it. Because the next Harper Finley who walks into BUD/S deserves to have you there. Someone who understands what she's up against. Someone who can teach her what I taught you, what Blackwood taught me. That strength isn't what you take, it's what you protect. Harper nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Good. They started jogging again, side by side, same pace, same rhythm. The sun fully up now, the water crashing against the shore, the sound of a new day beginning. Behind them, the Naval Amphibious Base stretched out in the morning light. Somewhere in there, a new class of candidates was waking up, getting ready for Hell Week, getting ready to be tested, getting ready to prove they belonged. Some of them would quit. Some of them would fail. Some of them would make it through and earn the trident and deploy and come home changed. And some of them, a small number, would become instructors, leaders, the ones who shaped the next generation, who taught them not just how to fight, but why to fight. Not just how to survive, but what to protect. Kira thought about Blackwood, about the trident pin he'd given her, about the 49 years he'd served, about the legacy he'd left, not in medals or missions, but in people, in the operators he'd trained who went on to train others, in the knowledge passed down through generations of warriors who understood that the hardest battles aren't always the ones you see coming. She thought about the room at Fort Bridger, about the 11 seconds that defined everything that came after, about the choice she made to use precision instead of rage, about the silence that spoke louder than any report ever could. And she thought about the women who came after her, Sloan Brennan, Reese Dalton, Harper Finley, dozens more whose names she'd never know. Women who walked into spaces that weren't built for them and made those spaces change shape. That was the legacy, not what happened in the room, but what happened because of it. The ripple that became a wave, the silence that became a roar, the moment when one woman's refusal to be broken became a movement of women who refused to break. They asked her once, during a command briefing about integration policies, if she regretted not filing a formal report about Fort Bridger, if she thought justice had been served. She'd looked at the panel of senior officers and said this: justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about prevention. Those three men live every day knowing they tried to break someone and failed, knowing they'll never be trusted again, knowing their names are attached to a story they can't rewrite. That's a sentence no court-martial could deliver. The panel had gone quiet. Then the senior officer, a captain with 30 years in, had nodded. Understood. Dismissed. But Kiera knew the real answer was more complicated. Justice wasn't just about those three men. It was about everyone who came after. The women who didn't have to fight that fight. The men who learned what accountability looked like. The culture that shifted because someone chose to make it shift. She ran faster now. Harper matched her pace. They hit the 2-mile mark, turned around, headed back toward base. The sun warm on their backs, the wind in their faces, the ocean infinite beside them. When they reached the gate, Harper slowed, stopped, caught her breath, looked at Kiera. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Kiera shook her head. "Don't thank me, just pass it on." "I will." "Good. Now get out of here. You've got a pipeline to redesign." Harper smiled, saluted, turned and jogged toward the admin building. Kiera watched her go. Watched the future walk away with purpose and clarity and strength that came from knowing she belonged. Then Kiera turned toward the water, walked to the edge, stood where Blackwood used to stand, looked out at the horizon where the ocean met the sky, thought about everything that had brought her here. The father who died before seeing her become this. The instructor who taught her what survival really meant. The room where she proved it. The missions where she lived it. The students who carried it forward. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the trident pin, Blackwood's original, from 1975. 49 years of service condensed into a piece of metal smaller than her palm. She held it up to the light, watched it catch the sun. Then she heard footsteps behind her, turned. A young woman, maybe 19, civilian clothes, nervous energy. "Excuse me, are you Lieutenant Commander Ashford?" Kiera nodded. "I am." The woman exhaled, relief flooding her face. "I'm Emma Reeves. I just got accepted to BUD/S, Class 402. I'm supposed to start in 3 months. Congratulations." Emma shifted her weight. "I'm scared. Not of the physical stuff, I can do that, but I've heard stories. About the culture. About how some guys don't want us there. About what happens when you're alone in a room with people who think you don't belong." Kiera looked at her, really looked at her. Saw herself a decade ago. Saw Harper 5 years ago. Saw every woman who'd ever stood at this exact spot, wondering if she was strong enough. "You'll be fine," Kiera said. "Not because it'll be easy, but because you'll have something they don't." Emma leaned forward. "What?" "People who came before you. People who fought so you wouldn't have to. People who taught you what to do when someone mistakes your silence for weakness." Emma absorbed that. "What do I do? If something happens?" Kiera smiled, small, knowing. "You remember that strength isn't what you take, it's what you protect. And then you show them exactly what happens when they forget that." Emma nodded slowly. "Okay, and one more thing." "Yes, ma'am." "When you make it through, and you will, you come find me. Because the work doesn't end at graduation. It's just beginning." "Yes, ma'am, I will." Emma started to walk away, stopped, turned back. "Ma'am, thank you for making this possible." Kiera shook her head. "I didn't make it possible, I just made it easier. The women before me made it possible, and you're going to make it easier for the ones after you. That's how this works." Emma smiled, saluted, walked away. Kiera turned back to the water, held the trident up one more time, thought about Blackwood, about Fort Bridger, about the 11 seconds that changed everything, about the silence that became a legacy. Then she whispered, quiet enough that only the ocean could hear, "Not a girl anymore. Never was." She put the trident back in her pocket, turned away from the water, walked toward base, toward the next mission, the next student, the next woman who needed to hear that she wasn't alone, that she was strong enough, that the fight was worth it. The sun climbed higher, Somewhere behind her, Emma Reeves was probably reading the BUD/S preparation guide for the 100th time. Somewhere else, Harper Finley was redesigning a training module that would make it harder for predators to hide. And somewhere far from here, in a high school counseling office, Reed Palmer was teaching teenagers about consent and accountability. The ripples never stopped. They just grew wider. Because the story didn't end in that room at Fort Bridger. It began there. And it would continue as long as there were women willing to walk into spaces that weren't built for them and make those spaces change. As long as there were instructors willing to teach not just combat, but courage. As long as there were warriors willing to protect what couldn't be taken. They thought they'd take something from her in that room. They were wrong. She took something from them instead. Their certainty, their power, their belief that silence meant compliance. And in return, she gave something to everyone who came after. Proof that strength doesn't come from taking. It comes from knowing what's worth protecting, and then protecting it, no matter the cost. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was the silent reckoning.